My name is Noel Marin. I lead the Hawaii EV organization. Nanette Vinton is also with the organization. So Nanette, thanks for joining us. I have been driving electric since 2011, started out with a Nissan Leaf. I have a Tesla at the moment. I power my home, my cars, my lawn equipment with solar energy. So I am very familiar with the challenges, the opportunities associated with electrification. I'd like to share with you some information about the organization, what we do, the role of the EV, the electric vehicle in creating a sustainable transportation future, and importantly, the opportunity that we have to accelerate our transition away from fossil fuels. Before we start, I'd just like to add that electrification of transportation is just one thing that we ought to do to achieve sustainable transportation. We also need to focus on efficiency. We also need to focus on reducing the need to actually have to get behind the wheel of a passenger car. So there are things like mass transit, multimodal transportation, even just how we plan our communities so that there's less of a need to actually have to get behind the wheel to get basic needs. So there are a lot of other things that need to happen, but our focus at the moment is to accelerate the adoption of electric cars so that you have less of the gas cars, more of the sustainable, zero emission vehicles. And that's what our group is about. So our mission is to accelerate the adoption of transportation, clean transportation, specifically electric vehicles in Hawaii. And we do this through a number of activities. So we share our information and stories. We do this through our online events, through our website, through social media. We have in-person conversations. This is really powerful in terms of helping people, meet other owners and help them get their questions answered. Sometimes it is more meaningful to have a conversation with an actual owner versus trying to get information from a car dealer, for example. So we conduct those. We also offer classes. We have a group in Kauai, for example, that would actually go to community colleges and provide information about electric cars. So there are a lot of things that we do from a community education perspective. It's actually our our secret sauce, if I may. The other thing that we do quite a bit, and what was actually the inspiration for this organization, is policy advocacy. There are about 14,000 or so, and it's growing, significantly year after year. 14,000 registered EVs in the state. And our thinking is that if we can get even just a portion of the owners to be advocates for policies that are friendly to charging infrastructure, to accelerating our shift away from fossil fuel vehicles, that we can make a bigger impact. And then lastly, we help out with charging infrastructure. So we help the utility and other organizations identify the ideal locations for charging stations, public charging stations. And we also help raise visibility to charging stations that are inoperable. So this is, education, policy advocacy, and charging infrastructure are the things that we focus on. There are a number of groups that make up Hawaii EV, the Tesla Hawaii Owners Group, Kauai EV, Big Island EV. We're trying to get all the clubs, all the groups that are focused on electric vehicles in the state part of our HUI so that we can have a bigger impact. We can't do this alone. Big systemic problems require that we collaborate with others, right? So that we can actually magnify our message, expand our, accelerate our reach to the community. So we partner with these different organizations to help make that happen. The thing I'd like to do now, I think it's just about a minute and a half, is share with you, and I think some of you haven't seen this before, so I think it's worth sharing, a video that helps to explain the nature of electric vehicles. And let me share that now. Can you see my screen? Can you see the, okay. So you should be able to hear this as well. Can you hear the sound? No? Okay.
At the top of your screen, if you're sharing your screen at the top, there should be a setting. I think it might be in like the more box
Yeah,
that
I have
says
You
that.
just share your sound.
Yeah, share computer sound.
Okay. So I think we have about 5 minutes left, and I have a few more slides to share, but I'm going to opt to not share because I want to have the opportunity to address any questions that you might have. And I will be sharing the slides that I intended to socialize here today in the the report, the post-event report. So why don't we do this? Why don't we just go around the room and address I'll address any questions that you might have.
Hello? Yes. I was curious what the cradle to grave looks like with an electric car with its batteries versus a really new internal combustion engine that uses gasoline.
So cradle to grave in terms of the actual impact, environmental impact, or
yeah, the environmental impact, like for minerals, for example, that's enormously energy intensive. So if you have to dump your EV batteries, what's the implications on that relative to overall efficiency of energy, let's say?
Yes, great, excellent question. Actually, it's a question that's been raised more and more now, given the fact that there's a big focus on the electrification of transportation. Let me just say that first of all, the way this process works, right? You've got battery production, and yes, you've got all the minerals, all the energy that goes into creating these packs, and then the pack is the core to the electric vehicle, the electric battery pack. Now, at some point, the amount of energy, and it degrades over time, which is natural, that's how batteries work. At some point, it gets to the point where the amount of energy that can be stored in the battery is not sufficient for the full utility of the car, right? It doesn't go as far as it ought to go. Those packs actually have life still. And the way at a really high level this works is you've got batteries in cars. Batteries eventually get to the point where they need to be recycled. They actually get, there's a big opportunity for them to be used actually in grid storage, stationary storage, right? Storage for your house, battery storage for your house, for the utility, and so on and so forth. At the end of that, unlike oil, which, after you consume it, it's up in the atmosphere. At the tail end of that, you've got recycling. And there are a lot of businesses that are coming up now on the West Coast, for example, in Europe, where they're actually looking for ways to recycle the raw materials that are in the battery packs. Because after all, they're valuable, right? They're not supposed to be just dumped into the landfill. There's value in that. So cradle to grave, I think one can argue that one, battery technology is ever evolving and gets to the point where we can use less of the conflict minerals. I know Tesla's already doing that. And then more importantly is that the components get recycled. it's not like what we see with fossil fuels, where there's a lot of energy in terms of extraction, transportation, refining, refining, and then ultimately it just goes up in the air. So that would be my response. I'm sure that there are other data out there or reports out there that can be shared. And Nanette, do you have anything you'd like to share on this one?
No, I just think that, with EVs, we're pretty new in it, and, batteries are supposed to last around 10 years. So you're just starting to see, I think within the last couple of years or so, how we can recycle those batteries. So I think actually starting now, there's going to be a lot of progress made towards, recycling all those batteries, because that's going to start to come around in a few years or so. And I think one thing that, a lot of people say, it's not really zero emissions, because when the car is produced, you use electricity and, all this to build the car. And, that's solved with, factories having renewable energy to help power those machines that make the cars. And over the life of the car, it ends up being that the car is actually emitting zero emissions even after the production.
I'd like to just add that we have over 1 million passenger cars in the state, and over 1 million gasoline cars in the state. We have about 14,000 electric cars. There's a long way to go. It's less than 2% of the vehicles we have on the road. The gasoline cars that we have on the road consume 30 million gallons of oil every month. So you can just imagine the amount of fossil fuel, that we're actually burning, creating global warming emissions, creating local air pollution. And more importantly, it highlights the fact that there's an opportunity here for energy independence, right? If we can find a way to harness our local renewable energy to create green power to facilitate our transportation and all the other things that require electricity, we have a great opportunity to also reduce our dependence. And that speaks to resilience, not from just an environmental perspective, but also from a economic perspective. There's some questions here in the chat. Resources to get our condo association started. We do have some information. In fact, in our last webinar, we had someone who shared their story, and I can share that with you, Craig. Hybrids aren't eligible for federal tax credits. I think that's not necessarily true. I think that some manufacturers are no longer eligible for tax credits, because the way the credits are stated is that after a certain volume of production, it starts to taper off. Now, the amount of credits for hybrids, and then correct me if I'm wrong on this one, is actually it's there, but it's less than what you would get with a full battery electric.
It depends on the size of the battery, right? So,
yeah. I'd love to hear more about how electric planes work. I don't believe I've heard of planes being powered without fossil fuels. Energy. So the main thing here is you've got some trends there with either liquid fuel that's actually enter the waiting room. So liquid fuels that are produced through green energy, right? That would be one way. So you're actually sequestering the carbon. You're creating renewable fuels. But there's another strategy, and that is through hydrogen. So hydrogen fuel cells, large hydrogen fuel cells in these planes fueled by hydrogen that's produced through renewable energy, not natural gas, is another opportunity for planes to actually fly with a greener footprint. And there are manufacturers out there that are already producing some at a smaller scale, and eventually we should start to see it for longer range planes.
Thank you.
Any other question? Biodiesel from algae? Yeah. And I think United and other major airlines are also experimenting with biofuels. Okay, I think we're out of time. So if there are any other questions, feel free to get in touch with me. You can visit us on hawaiieev.org, and we have a lot of information there, as well as the opportunity to get in touch with us. Before we close, anything else does anyone have any closing comment or question?
I have a question. I've noticed that a lot of people have to wait to charge their cars at charging stations. I was observing that online, that people were reporting on things like that. Do you know of plans to increase charging stations so that people can easily do that?
Yeah, that's a big focus of our organization, is to ensure that there is adequate public charging. I think it's critical for the democratization of transportation, electric transportation. Not everybody has a home charger, right? People living in condos and apartments, people who are visiting, renting cars, people who rent homes. So it's very important. And yes, in the last legislative session, there were a couple of bills at least that are focused on helping to increase the number of charging stations by enforcing current laws that are in the books that mandate the installation of charging stations and EV parking. And then also to fund the rebate for commercial chargers. So there's a 3% on 3 cents on of the barrel tax is actually going to be feeding a commercial charging station rebate, which will help commercial sites, condos, et cetera, get more of these stations up and running.
Cool. Good.
Okay, with that, I think we're going to go back into the room, the main room, so we can join the closing remarks. Thanks very much for your time, and I apologize for the mix-up earlier. Aloha.
Aloha.